Tessa Blanchard makes an impact. AEW and TNT get married. And Marty Scurll transforms into Scrooge McDuck. This time on Wrestling with the Business.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are joined once again by the greatest tag team in wrestling commentary history. Matt Lambert, Jeremy Bodette, Wrestling with the Business. We're back and we're bringing you the latest and the greatest from the world of professional wrestling. Now, last couple of weeks we've been striving to bring you new and exciting stuff from outside the world of WWE. Obviously, we focus on them a lot because they are the big dog in the yard, but there's been a lot happening this week outside of the WWE, and we're going to get into the biggest headlines now, starting with a little company you might have heard of called Impact Wrestling.
Wait a minute, Impact Wrestling? Who the heck are they?
You may know them better as TNA, formerly.
Oh.
Yeah, that strikes a nerve, right? The company that brought you Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, all the guys are still going in their later years. So this weekend they had a pay-per-view called Hard to Kill, and pretty controversial, historical, whatever word you want to use, main event with Tessa Blanchard facing Sami Callihan for Impact's main championship, the Impact World title. And believe it or not, she won.
I guess she's going to be on the front of their video game package this year.
You should hope, right? So the event took place in Dallas, Texas, this past Sunday. Now, I didn't see this whole event. From what I heard, the first half of the show was pretty slow, pretty boring, but the second half really picked up, culminating with this main event match. Now, we talked about this a week or two ago, that Tessa was going up for that main title. There's been some controversy surrounding it, though. I mean, what's your personal opinion on this type of match here? What do you think about intergender wrestling in general?
I think it's very controversial. There's always a significant risk to injury of the performers. Mm-hmm. I know that special care is taken between male performers that have significant size differences. Oftentimes, every few years or so, there's that whole David versus Goliath angle that they take. And I know for sure that, every time Ray got in the ring with Great Khali or Mr. Fun Size, Marco Stunt gets in the ring with basically anybody. There are special precautions that have to be taken. This becomes even more important when you're discussing a male versus female scenario. Now, obviously, winning the championship is unprecedented, but wrestling is not unprecedented, right? I mean, China, right, probably was the first sort of
China was Intercontinental Champion along with Chris Jericho. They were co-champions or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say she was the real barrier breaker. But she is not the size of your average female professional wrestler either.
Right.
So, I think I think it could be very interesting if they're extremely careful. My primary concern just hearing about the booking is that the match was boring.
Yeah. I've only seen clips of the match. I haven't seen the whole thing. It seemed to be a pretty decent match. But I've been keeping up with Impact throughout the year. Tessa has been wrestling the men for the majority of 2019. Mainly Sami Callihan and his stable of OVE. 4 guys altogether she's been trading back and forth with, or mixed tag matches, or whatever the case. It's been a pretty good story, pretty good build, and it was pretty predictable that they were eventually going to get to this point. But again, like I said, there's been some controversy. First thing is, after winning the match, Booker T of WWE made his thoughts known. And he said something along the lines of this being the worst wrestling decision in history. Apparently, Mae Young giving birth to a hand doesn't count.
Yeah, that is some rarefied air up there. That air is mighty thin. If that's truly what it, that probably, I'm not sure that it beats out, hooking Owen Hart up to a wire in a stadium. Perhaps nope. This one beats that decision. Maybe running Goldust over with a car. No, that one's not up there at all. No. How about the mass transit incident? No. Cutting some kid open that's underage. No, that one's not up there.
You've brought that one up a couple times in the past. We might have to go into detail on that in some future video.
I definitely do not think that it would certainly amount to the worst decision in professional wrestling history. I think that if Impact Wrestling, I think the most extreme thing Impact Wrestling could do, think of the most extreme thing that they could do. They're too small a company for it to have, they're a one person screaming in a crowd of 500. No matter what you say, no more than 2 or 3 people are going to turn their heads. So I just don't think that they carry enough weight in order to throw that kind of weight around to call it the worst decision in wrestling history. Though, I mean, without knowing the details of his comments or a whole lot of the context.
Oh, well, I'll go into that a little bit right now. He went on to say that the idea of booking a woman to beat a man wasn't totally believable, in the sense that if she were to get in there with a Brock Lesnar type of wrestler, or in the case of Impact, Brian Cage, who's pretty similar to Brock Lesnar, it's not really believable as far as the story goes. And then if she were to move back to the women's division and a woman beats her, then that woman who beat her should be able to beat every man in the company. So, not really political correct as far as the comments he's making, but on the other hand, very logical in a storytelling sense, in a common sense kind of sense.
In math we call that the translative property, right? So if A is bigger than B, then therefore you can translate it, right? Mm-hmm. So I understand that. It sounds to me on the surface it's just another way of saying that the women's division isn't as competitive, as entertaining as I'll call it the open division, because it's not called the men's title. It's the world championship, right?
Yep.
So I'll just call it the open division. I mean, you're essentially saying that she is right now the best wrestler in that promotion.
Right. That
either is true or it isn't true. In the world of WWE, we've sort of been caught up in this sort of siloed off, right? There's the women's division over here. We always talk about it separately, and there's never any mixing. Mm-hmm. And it's always just sort of taken for granted, at least for the last 20 or 25 years. It's been taken for granted that the women, not that they can't compete with the men, but that they don't compete with the men.
Right.
WWE's done a really good job of tap dancing around the whole women on average are smaller, have less hand-eye coordination, are weaker, have less bone density, and
the only matches where men have actually faced women in WWE in the last 15-20 years was when what's that name, that jobber's name, the guy with no chin, James Ellsworth. He faced Asuka and Becky Lynch they were squashes. He just got beat up by women. Those are the only intergender matches that have happened in WWE in recent memory.
Yeah. So the real question is she the best wrestler in the promotion? If the answer is yes, then I mean, they made Rey Mysterio the world champion. Now, Rey Mysterio's not a woman, but he's 5'7", and he weighs 100. Now he probably weighs 180 pounds, but back then he probably weighed 160 pounds or 150 pounds. So, he's extremely talented, but it's not that hard to find a woman that's 5'7" and 150 pounds. Mm-hmm. So, that's why it's important that they do the match right. If they work the match in a way that's she's not punching him in the head and he's not having to sell it, if she's being sneaky and slippery and landing high spots and then scampering away and, going into submission moves that don't require an awful lot of strength or that allows her to leverage, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style, different areas of her body, then I think you could easily sell it. I mean, I think that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that a highly trained MMA woman like Shayna Baszler or, any of them, certainly at the top level of the sport, could, beat the living crap out of half the men in the locker room, strategically speaking. So
that was another point Booker T brought up, mentioning Ronda Rousey. If she got in a UFC ring against John Jones or what's one of the other big name UFC guys,
Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I mean, what as good as Ronda Rousey is, I mean, what's the likely outcome? No,
she would absolutely get piss pounded. That's why you have to sell it as you have to sell it as Taken, right? I have a unique set of skills that make me a nightmare, right? That's how you have to sell it. And yeah, if you put Shayna Baszler in a wrestling match with Brock Lesnar, yes, it's going to be the most boring match in the history of boring matches, right?
It's going to be a typical Brock Lesnar match.
Yeah, maybe she'll kick him in the nuts and win. I don't know.
That's right. That's the only way to beat him.
Yeah, but if you sell it as maybe like a Shayna Baszler versus like it's not fair to talk about Shorty because he's so short and small, but someone without extensive technical skills, or at least isn't gimmicked that way, maybe like a Buddy Murphy or someone like that. He's big but not that big. I think you could sell a decent match in that way, and that's why I would really want to see the match. But my primary concern would be that it would just be really boring, and this has nothing to do with her being a woman, but when you give the title to somebody that hasn't convinced the crowd that they're the best wrestler in the business, it's going to dilute the title no matter what. Jon Moxley has to be the next world champion. They're building him up so hard in AEW that, in my opinion, if he goes in and they seem to be setting him up on a nice trajectory here on a championship run, if they have him lose, it's going to dilute the championship because he's the best wrestler in that promotion right now.
Yep.
No questions about it. So, that's my biggest concern. It really doesn't have anything to do with her being a woman. If she's the best wrestler there, then she should be the world champion. I mean, she's the world champion.
Yep. And so, I mean, she definitely is a good wrestler. The best, that's questionable. But this wasn't the only controversy surrounding this match. The day before this match took place, Tessa put out a tweet along the lines of women should support each other, cool things can happen, whatever. And this brought out a ton of accusations towards Tessa about bullying other women in the locker room, being racist towards one specific woman in Japan. And this brought out a lot of accusations towards her before this match took place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what her strategy is on this one. She needs to just keep her mouth shut. I mean, she's holding the title right now.
Well, yeah, at first she said she wasn't going to acknowledge anything, that these accusations were ridiculous, and she waited nearly a week before she responded and basically put out a statement that didn't apologize and, obviously said, racism isn't in my heart, these words aren't in my heart, and it denied everything. But it's kind of questionable. Several people came out confirming these statements, that they were there, that they saw it happen and whatnot. Tessa is a second or third generation wrestler, and I kind of feel like all multi-generation wrestlers have at one time or another had accusations like this lobbed towards them. In the past, we've heard about, Randy Orton being rough in the locker room. Just recently, I don't know, nothing like this has been confirmed or whatnot, but at one of the recent pay-per-views, we saw Charlotte Flair's reaction to Kairi Sane getting seemingly injured during the match at, I think it was TLC. Charlotte did not respond well, seemingly, on TV, on the screen. And I kind of feel like that's a recurring theme with multi-generational wrestlers.
This is the last thing I want to say on this topic. Thank God that racism today is not nearly as blatant and outward as it was before. Thank God that people aren't allowed to publicly discriminate against others because of their race or gender or sexual orientation or any of that kind of stuff. But one of the new problems that we found ourselves in is racism used to be something that existed inside someone's heart that they felt free to express. And today, it definitely still exists in some people's hearts, but because they aren't as free to express it as they once were, we've created this scenario where you kind of have to guess what's in somebody's heart, and that's what makes it so difficult. You can't see inside somebody's heart, so it's really easy. It makes it really easy to lob accusations, and it's very difficult to prove a negative, especially without video evidence. Definitely the fact that multiple people came out lends some credibility to that scenario, but I think it's very difficult to pass judgment or to determine guilt for a crime of the heart, which is essentially what racism has become. The laws have made it that way. The laws have made it so that racism is just something that bad people feel in their heart and that they can't express publicly anymore. It's made it much more difficult to identify. So, if it's true, then I hope she gets everything that she deserves, and I'm sure she'll probably never work in the business again, and she's gonna have to start waiting tables for a living, I'm sure. However, if it's not true and this is some kind of a smear campaign against her, I hope that those people are equally punished too, because there's nothing more racist than false claims of racism, right? Because it dilutes real racism that actually exists in the world. So, her best bet, if it's untrue, is just to be a happy warrior and to, continue to fight with a smile. And if it is true, she should, probably resign. She should probably resign. And I'm sure if more reports come out or if video footage leaks or something like that, I'm sure she will end up resigning. I'm sure the company will make her resign. They probably won't, because they're going to want to make a public display of it, right? Because now they made her the champion.
Right.
So, but it is interesting that all this doesn't seem to come out until she's world champion. So.
Yep, and that's the thing. Regardless of whatever is true or not true, whatever controversy surrounds it, she is the current Impact World Champion. And I am interested to see where they go with this. I'll definitely be following along with the show, with the weekly TV show.
All right.
But besides Impact, there was some other stuff that happened. Let's talk about AEW, our favorite show.
Let's talk about a little business. We We haven't talked about business in a little bit. So some really interesting stories broke this week regarding the AEW business. So AEW has decided to marry up with Turner Network Television, and I believe it was Warner, the Warner company, and they've signed an agreement that lasts to the end of 2023. It's worth just shy of 150 million. I think it's 145 million, which for a 3-year deal. Oh, actually, it's a 4-year deal. You're looking at, what is that, like 30 some odd million dollars, $40 million. So that's about, that's not too far off from what NXT got. So that's definitely a good sign. The viewership has been consistently above what they wanted, which was about 500,000, but it really isn't going anywhere.
We've kind of floundering a bit.
I'm not going to say floundering, but it's just flatlined. It premiered at what, just short of 1 million. It leveled off at, just short of maybe 800,000. And for the last, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, that's pretty much where it's lived. It's never cracked 1 million, and I don't think it's ever dipped below 680,000. So,
it's been consistently over what they were hoping to get.
Yeah, and in my opinion, 500,000 is a pretty low bar. Not having the numbers of what TNT normally pulls on a Wednesday night from 8 to 10, I don't really know for them that might be a solid step up. But for me, that's not, especially when you compare it to their competitors. On Monday Night Raw is still getting consistently over 2 million viewers.
Yep.
And SmackDown's consistently in the 1.6 to 1.9 million range. So, for them to be a third of SmackDown and a quarter of a good Raw week, that's not that great. But this did secure them with a partner. So now they have some, speaking from your side, Matt, now they have some long-term investment in story.
Yep.
Right? Now that they've got guaranteed eyeballs for the next 4 years, now I think you're going to start seeing some real story development. And one interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about that's also sort of looped into this deal is AEW Dark is going to be getting its own spot on one of the Turner channels, whether it be TNT or TBS. This is an opportunity for them to enhance their brand from scratch. What are some of the things that they need to do out of the gate to make sure that they get a good start with Dark? Should they keep doing what they're doing? Should they use it to enhance the storyline that the storylines and the matches they're trying to already put in place? What would be the best way for them to use this Dark opportunity?
I think they need to use it to better build the main storylines going on. Currently, as it is, on shows on Dynamite, they regularly refer to stories that happen on Dark, which only airs on YouTube every week. So using Dark now, if that's going to be on TNT or TBS or whatever channel, they need to use that to build up the current storylines, whether it's video packages, whether it's promos, whether it's recaps, whatever the case. Really using it to augment Dynamite and augment the current storylines. It's rather than doing what WWE does, having separate brands. I think that kind of diminishes the product a bit, but they need to use it to shore things up.
Yeah, and their roster isn't big enough to do something like what WWE does yet. Right. Although who knows, they could be expanding dramatically. But I think it represents 2 more hours of opportunity, maybe a week. Certainly, I would think every other week. It represents 2 more hours of opportunity to put their product in front of the customer and help develop it and get that critical feedback, what's the best storyline that they have going right now that they could expand upon? For me, it's in the name, Dark.
Oh, really? You like the Dark Order storyline going on?
I mean, those Dark Order promos are some of the best promos I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, those video packages they started doing,
yeah,
I think it's kind of tapered off for myself. It's tapered off a little bit. With
you didn't like the one from Wednesday night, the corporate one where he's standing up in front and giving a presentation?
Yeah, it's a little confusing because now they're introducing a higher power. I mean, all this time I thought Evil Uno was the leader of the Dark Order.
It sounded like him.
No, it's a different guy. It's like they're masking the voice. And a couple weeks ago, Evil Uno was talking to this higher power himself. So there's some sort of leader that's ahead of him. And it's kind of muddied the waters a little bit for me, anyways. I mean, it's still.
I just think it's really creative. And
it is creative, and they're definitely a lot better off than they were when they started, for sure.
Yeah, the background was key. So what do you think is the storyline that would benefit best from the extra screen time?
The story they got going with the Elite and Adam Page right now is probably the most intriguing, the most interesting. They build a lot of that too on the Young Bucks YouTube channel, being the Elite also. So that would benefit a bit more story on the AEW side of things. Other than that... So
this is the Adam Page sort of distancing
himself from the Elite, yeah. We saw a lot of that in the four-way tag team match this week that started the show, which was...
Why haven't we seen more of Jericho chasing him if he's being disaffected from the Elite?
He's got his own thing going on with Moxley right now. Maybe once that's over, maybe he will.
That's low-hanging fruit for me. I mean, if you're in heavy recruitment mode like he is, I mean, you keep working Moxley, but that would be an interesting storyline, you know? Come to the dark side, Luke. Yeah.
I think it's less about recruiting, and his thing with Moxley trying to recruit him was just so that he wouldn't have to face him.
So to celebrate this new long-term contract, they decided to double down on an old favorite of yours and mine, and they decided to sign Taz long-term. And they're going to put him on commentary on the new brand. I think that the best thing that they could do would be to either take Tony Schiavone or JR and move them onto the Dark brand and have two-man booths.
Yeah, I agree. The three-man booth is still a little much. I've never liked three-man.
I think on their own, I think it's too many leaders.
Yep.
Each one of those guys has extensive experience doing play-by-play and extensive experience doing color. And I think they're getting in each other's way, and I think it's too crowded. Mm-hmm. It's too crowded.
And Taz has been on a couple episodes of Dark. He is still an excellent commentator. I mean,
he's good on color.
On color, right. He did it for years on SmackDown, then he was in TNA/Impact for even longer than I think he was in WWE. And he's been away for quite some time, but he came back to it like it was nothing. He sounded excellent. So I think this is a great move on AEW's part.
And one last interesting piece of news, and this is business related. Anyone that started a business or tried to create a business knows that for the first 3 to 5 years, any business is going to be underwater. You're going to lose money. There's a lot of initial investments that are required, and it takes time to develop a customer base and develop product loyalty and all the things that you need to really put yourself in the black. And the idea is, you take off like a rocket ship and you grow and you become more profitable. Well, they just celebrated their first anniversary in existence, AEW did. And this is maybe their 3rd or 4th month on television. And with the signing of this contract, that effectively makes AEW profitable, which is going to do, I think, exactly what you and I were so excited about at the beginning of this whole Wednesday Night Wars journey. Is it's going to eliminate the reasons for AEW to be conservative. It's like, you know what? For the next 4 years, we're going to take the reins off. We don't have to worry about being profitable. We don't have to worry about losing our screen time, and we can experiment, and we can pick and choose here and there. We can try some stuff that's never been done before. We can play on the fringe. Sometimes it works. Like, I think what they're doing with the Dark Order right now is really working. Sometimes maybe not so much with the whole Moxley Omega lights out match, but either way, I think it's going to really encourage them to do some damage to the status quo and really free them up from a creative standpoint. So, I mean, really, it's a perfect storm right now. I mean, everything seems to... The wind is at AEW's back. They're financially solvent. They got guaranteed screen time. They've got more screen time when AEW Dark. They're the hottest game in town. Everybody wants to be a part of their organization. So they've got basically the pick of the litter. They've already, in the first few weeks, they've created a brand name as sort of the independent NXT. Right, these are people that they pick and choose. They're from all throughout the country, and who knows? They might, every time they pick somebody, every time they pull a star out of a no-name promotion in Biloxi, Mississippi, you just found a whole new group of fans that are going to fall in love with your promotion and that are going to watch it with enthusiasm every week. The same thing when you pull a guy from Washington, when you pull a guy from Arizona, when you pull a guy from Colorado. He or she has their own fan base that they're going to take with them. And there's not a whole lot of reliance on that sort of old, like you sort of mentioned in our last segment, on that sort of old intergenerational wrestling heritage, right? They don't rely so much on that, meaning that you're not recycling through the exact same fan base over and over and over again. And, I think you do that for 2 or 3 generations and it gets to be like you're smelling your own farts. And, this helps renew the competition, and it really creates a sense of excitement in the brand. You never quite know who's going to come up next. You never really know who you're going to like and who you're not going to like. And I think that it really plays to AEW's advantage. They're really, they're a privately held company. So unfortunately, I don't have the same kind of access to them as I do WWE, but it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the ring as a result of the really good decisions that Tony Khan and the executive management team have made with AEW up to this point. I'm really excited. 2020 is, I think, going to be a really big year for them.
Agreed.
All right, let's talk about old Marty.
All right, so moving on from WWE and AEW, let's talk some Ring of Honor. So Ring of Honor started around the same time as Impact, actually, TNA, after WCW closed its doors. And they have consistently been a top indie promotion. A lot of the guys in WWE now, the top guys, all got their start in Ring of Honor. We're talking Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Samoa Joe. All those guys have been through there. But one word that made news headlines this week was Marty Scurll. So for those who aren't familiar with Marty Scurll, he's a British wrestler who came into ROH several years ago. Became very popular very quickly. He became a member of the Bullet Club, joined the Elite with Cody and the Bucks and Kenny, and was a real mainstay with that group and with that promotion. Once Cody and the Bucks and Kenny all left and went to start AEW, Marty stayed in ROH, started his own faction called Villain Enterprises, and has really thrived in that promotion. Now, after being a free agent for a couple of months, showing up in NWA and other promotions across the world, he just signed the most lucrative contract in Ring of Honor history. Now, that just saying that may not mean all that much, but a few videos ago, you and I spoke of the salaries in WWE and what some of the top guys make. You remember off the top of your head what like some of the big names were making?
God, I think Lesnar was making 15. I think Orton was like 5-ish a year. I'm sure, these numbers are a few years old, but I'm pretty sure that Triple H's performance contract was somewhere in the vicinity of 8 or 10. Same thing with Cena back when he was hot to trot back in the 2005, 2008 era.
So, yeah, the exact number for Marty's contract wasn't released, but wrestling news sites are reporting that it's in the near amounts of WWE's main roster upper card. So we're talking, anywhere between 2 and 5 million, somewhere in that range.
That's a lot of money for
That's a lot of money. And there were other perks along with that made this an insanely good deal. So the guys in WWE are wrestling 200, 250, even 300 days a year. Marty's contract got 40 days. $5 million or so for only 40 days of work. On top of that, he is now the head booker in Ring of Honor. On top of that...
That's a bigger job than wrestling.
Oh, yeah, for sure. On top of that, he can still wrestle for other promotions. Right now, he's got a storyline going in NWA against the NWA World Champion, Nick Aldis. So, this, like I said, this is a huge, huge deal. And because when he was a free agent, there was a lot of speculation he was going to go to AEW. That's where, the rest of the elite are. Those are where his friends are. It was actually reported that he was supposed to be, we mentioned the Dark Order earlier, it was reported that he was originally supposed to be that higher power. And that he was supposed to debut on that episode before Christmas when Dark Order had that big beatdown at the end of the episode.
Yep.
Supposedly the plans were to have Marty Scurll debut that night. So it really shows what kind of what this means for Ring of Honor, what they're really putting out there to keep him in that company.
He's a busy man.
Yeah, most definitely. Now the question is, because he's so tight with the guys at AEW, because Ring of Honor has had a working relationship with New Japan in the past, this past year it kind of cooled down a little bit, but seems to be picking up again. Is there any chance for a massive working relationship between AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan, possibly NWA? What would that look like for the wrestling business or for business as a whole, do you think?
You might see a moderate close relationship. I think I could see AEW buying Ring of Honor.
Wow.
Yeah, I could see this would be basically the first non-WWE acquisition in I don't know, maybe the history. I don't know. I can't think of another one.
That would be
off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of incentive. I mean, look, Marty has FU money now, right? In the world of professional wrestling, $5 million is FU money. Mm-hmm. So Marty can do whatever the hell Marty wants to do. And it looks like he's done a really effective job of negotiating this contract in such a way to give him the freedom to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But this is not the kind of contract that everybody can get. So it's going to create some issues in the locker room, I would think. There's got to be some people in the locker room that think that they do a better job than Marty, and and that, they're not worth, I mean, are most of the guys in that locker room making six figures? I don't know.
I doubt it.
I don't know. Yeah, not at Ring of Honor. I mean,
there are some guys who have been there the nearly 20-year history, the entire run of Ring of Honor. So some of those guys might be up there, but I'd be very surprised if the majority of them are making that kind of money.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an insane amount of money. If the public has access to the type of knowledge that you're sharing, way more information is going to be available behind the scenes.
Right.
And, I'm sure there are some people in the business that have a better idea of what he's making than we do. But, if it's in that, $3 to $5 million range, I don't see super close working relationships. Again, maybe on like a performer to performer basis, like, yeah, maybe Marty by himself comes over, but I don't see any type of inter-brand promotion. It really doesn't. It would almost be like a YouTuber with 1 million or 2 million subscribers doing some kind of a cross promotion thing with a guy that has 10,000 subscribers. It really doesn't.
Yeah, that was one question that's been going around. What would AEW benefit from something like that? ROH definitely would.
Yes. AEW would benefit in the sense that they would have access to great talent.
That's what I'm thinking. ROH could kind of become AEW's NXT, their developmental property.
And there is a sort of why buy the cow when the milk's free, right? I mean, if everybody in there has an open contract and you can make schedules work and whatnot, why buy the cow when the milk's free? But schedules can be very limited. And while I'm sure that the Ring of Honor guys aren't competing 250 to 300 days out of the year, you're going to have issues, and you want to look up the road 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You don't want to do it, what WWE does, and they can, only look 3 or 4 days in front of their face. So, I think that with the financial situation that we just discussed regarding AEW, with them being profitable, if they see expansion in their merchandise, if they see extra advertising opportunities, if they expand and their fan base starts to grow, they've got an opportunity for an extremely lucrative fifth year in the contract that I didn't mention, but it's an option in the contract to extend another year at a significant increase. And if Ring of Honor continues to sort of flatline or to kind of struggle, which is really what they've been doing, if this $5 million investment in Skrull doesn't really pay off, they're putting themselves in a very difficult financial situation. I mean, that's $5 million is 15% of AEW's budget.
Yeah.
15%. I mean, that's the equivalent. They estimate that each AEW show is about $500,000 in total expenses, right? So you could do 10 AEW shows for the same amount. That's 10 weeks, 2.5 months of AEW shows you could do for one Marty Skrull. So this is a gambit. This is a huge gambit, a financial gambit on the part of Ring of Honor. I mean, if this doesn't pay off for them, they're in big trouble. So it has to pay off. And the only way I could foresee it paying off is if, they form some kind of a partnership. But I don't see any partnership ending without AEW just absorbing them. Buying them, absorbing them. I mean, pick whatever way you want to word it. It doesn't necessarily have to be hostile, sort of kind of the way the WWE WCW acquisition was. It doesn't necessarily have to be hostile, but I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. especially if they're ready to expand and they've got the room in their roster and there's a good solid group of Ring of Honor talent that they would just end up scalping anyways. If that's the case, you may as well buy the whole brand. Keep it for yourself.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see going forward what 2020 is going to bring for not just Ring of Honor, but all these promotions we've been talking about.
And for those of you that don't know, 2 days ago, the great and powerful Rocky Johnson passed on. I believe January 15th he passed on. For those of you that aren't familiar with Rocky Johnson, I really just all you really need to know for you young people is that he's The Rock's father. It's Dwayne Johnson's father, and he was a wrestling legend. And I think if you go back and watch some of the work that he did, especially in the early to mid 1980s, you can really tell that that the apple or the rock didn't fall far from the tree. We wish his family the best during this difficult time, and he's a legend, and he will be remembered fondly by all of us. So, thank you.
We'll definitely keep everyone updated as new news comes out about these subjects we've discussed, as well as anything new that comes along.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are actually considering expanding our coverage to include the new XFL, which premieres on Fox February 8th. One of our next videos is going to be a commentary on some of the rule changes. As a matter of fact, we might do a whole series where we sort of address each rule change in the context and in comparison to the NFL. I think that they're making some very thoughtful and interesting changes that could very well create a very unique product that I'm definitely very interested in watching on February 8th. So please stay tuned and check in for that video. Should be coming in the next week to 10 days or so.
Yep. So, as always, follow up on our social medias and our website. Keep apprised of everything. And in the meantime, always remember, keep kayfabe, follow the money, and we'll keep wrestling with the business.